Hello there, woman beings.
Hi.
Today, on this episode of the Woman Being Podcast, we're going to be talking about someone that you love, that we all love. It's Britney, bitch. So, strap in. We're going to get started and talk about all the good things about the documentary that came out called Framing Britney?
Framing Britney Spears.
Framing Britney Spears.
So the New York Times.
New York Times. Let's get started. Welcome to the Woman Being Podcast community,
where we explore thoughts and opinions.
And have the freedom to change our minds.
Without expectation or judgment.
We will hold a safe space and support each other.
As we navigate together in the form of feminine.
Woman Beings, for those of you that don't know, there's a new documentary. Well, I guess it's not. Well, yeah, it is new. I think February 2nd was when it came out of this year. And it is about basically the story of Britney Spears, how she became Britney, her journey. It follows a lot of like paparazzi and press and people that were on her team and worked with her, and moving into a lot of the legal issues she is facing now with something called conservatorship.
A conservacy. No, a conservatorship.
Conservatorship.
Dang it.
Conservationing.
Yeah.
A conferencing.
Confronting.
A
Confrontership.
Communication.
Conservatorship is the legal term.
Conservatorship.
Which means?
Basically, you don't get to make your own decisions. It's,
Yeah.
Yeah, when there's like an Eldor.
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 All right.
I am Eldor.
Yes,
Arendelle.
she does play D&D, if you're wondering.
When there's an elder.
That's the name of her character.
Who, is out of their mind, or, as people lose function and ability to manage their finances and their own, health decisions and stuff, usually a person will step in, a family member usually, who manages their finances and their personal decisions. And so Britney, after the kind of breakdown in 2008, had her father take conservatorship over her person and her finances. And so as of recently, and this is kind of what the documentary covers, is she's fighting against his control over her estate. And so...
Yeah, which, by the way, she's worth about $60 million, in case you're wondering. So it's not a small amount of money, obviously. So yeah, we're here to talk about it. So, ladies, I must know, before we get started, what are your early impressions of Britney Spears? Do you remember when Baby One More Time came out? Do you remember, when she did the head shave thing? What did you think of Britney growing up?
I loved Britney growing up. I actually think that her album was one of the first I ever owned.
Wow.
I think I only had Kids Bop albums before I owned Britney Spears' album. I forget the name of the album, but it's the one with Oops, I Did It Again on it and all that good stuff. I also had the Britney Spears Barbie tour bus and the Britney Spears Barbie that went with it.
The one with the pigtails?
No, I actually think she had shoulder length straight blonde hair.
Okay.
And so she wasn't dressed up for the music video.
Oh, okay.
But it was just Britney being Britney. And so I was very into Britney Spears on a very surface level sort of level. I didn't follow her in the news because, what was the news? I was in third grade literally when I was here listening to her, and I didn't keep up with what was going on with her. I just really liked that album and had the tour bus. I do remember it was my birthday. I don't remember what birthday it was. It must have been, let me think. It was 2008, right? So that must have been my...
No, 9th grade.
It was my 8th grade birthday. And so it must have been when I turned 14. I was having a birthday party at a hotel, and I remember seeing on the news screens at the hotel where they had the continental breakfast that Britney had just shaved her head. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I like carried on because I didn't really care about her that much at that point. I was in 8th grade by then, and so I just wasn't really listening to Britney Spears anymore. But I remember that happening and sort of being like, oh, she's crazy, whatever, and just sort of brushing it off. And that's honestly all I really cared about Britney Spears until now.
Until today.
Yeah, I think, like, for me, I grew up in a very conservative home. Britney was bad. Britney Spears was bad. Her songs were bad. Don't listen to her songs or her music, which I still heard them, like, through other people's. I think I had one of those little, do you guys remember those?
The little radios?
Yeah, the little radios where you could, like, put different songs in it and it would play.
And it played one song.
What are those called? I don't remember what those are called, but I think I had, like, Hit Me Baby in that at some point. But, like, to me, Britney Spears was always kind of this distant, crazy, like, bad woman who was crazy. So when she shaved her head in 2008, I was like, okay, yeah, of course, because Britney's crazy and that makes sense. And, you know, she's probably the butt of many of my jokes. Not many, but, like, the occasional joke. Like, she was just, like, the crazy woman celebrity.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, similar. I remember there was a girl on the playground that had one of those little radios with, like, the song, and it was Hit Me Baby One More Time. And I was like, that is the best song I've ever heard. I was also raised very Christian, very conservative, and we just didn't really listen to pop music. But somehow I just knew about Britney, and I, like, really liked her and, like, looked up to her, and I thought her outfits were so cute. And, yeah, I remember going to church the following Sunday after the head shave situation, and everyone was talking about it. And it made me, like, so sad because it felt like everyone was, like, judging her, but I was also like, this person's a celebrity and, like, we have no idea what this person's going through. And I didn't really, like, engage. I just kind of, like, detached. But then I also, fun fact, I got tutoring for dyslexia most of my school age life. And me and my teacher, Paula Mall, were sitting in our classroom and doing my work, and I noticed her class had made, like, all these posters of, like, we love Britney. And I thought it was so sweet that they were, like, showing so much support of this person that they didn't know. But, like, to me, like, that school resembled more of, like, Jesus than, like, my church people did in that situation.
I remember, too, in college when head shaving became cool. It was, like, 2014-ish time period. I remember sitting on, like, I think a school bus. Like, we had a bus system that ran through the school. And thinking, like, Britney was ahead of her time, and we did her a severe disservice.
She was totally ahead
Britney
of her time.
would have been cool today. And we, like, hated her back then for that. And now everyone's doing it.
Yeah.
We
It's, like,
owe
the
her an
new,
apology.
Like, woke, or not even woke. It's just, like, the feminist thing. Like at
cool
some
girl.
level.
Well, in some ways it's fashion. Like, there's a lot of different, like, decisions that go into shaving your head. It's not just, like, whatever. But, yeah, like, I'm just, like, we owe her an apology. I remember having this very strong feeling, like, we did Britney wrong.
Yeah. And another thing that you can't forget, which I don't know if you guys were exposed to this or not, we didn't talk about it beforehand, but is Chris Crocker, who came out with the YouTube video, Leave Britney Alone. Were you guys informed of this?
No.
This was a huge viral YouTube video right after the head shaving and everything had happened. and it's this man in like makeup and a wig sobbing to a camera with like this weird curtain behind him, and he's just crying like, leave Britney alone, what did she ever do to all of you? And it was this huge viral video, not because people were sympathetic to it, but because they thought it was so funny that this guy was in makeup and crying about Britney Spears. And he was like, as far as my knowledge is, he was actually very sincere. And was probably one of the original like Free Britney people, because Free Britney, which is a hashtag that's been circulating about this conservatorship that we'll talk about more later, has been a movement happening ever since the conservatorship started. So that's another thing that I thought of just now that was like a very relevant memory. I'm sure that video, it probably has like hundreds of millions of views.
Absolutely.
But it was a huge thing and people would always make fun of it and be like, leave Britney alone. And it was a joke.
Yeah. Which also, for those of you that don't know, Britney is like a big icon in the LGBTQ plus community, in the drag queen community. Like she is a big icon for those people. And so she has a very devoted following even today, which is so interesting with this kind of situation and seeing how those things will come into play. So what did you think about the documentary? Was anything surprising to you? Tell me your thoughts.
I think the thing that stood out to me the most, well, there's a couple things, was number one, the way the media treated her. You see a lot of examples of like just blatant misogyny towards her in the interview questions that were directed at her and the type of conversations that were chosen to have like in interviews and things like that, and in the paparazzi abuse, I would say. And then but the one thing that really stuck out to me is when she did shave her head, they showed kind of some images of that happening, and her sentiment the whole time was just like, I just want you to leave me alone. I just want people to stop touching me. And hair, I think, is like such a like attractive, like iconic, I don't know, identity related attribute of a woman. And that just like really hit me, that like in a sense she was trying to like make herself repulsive. She was trying to remove something that was causing all of this crazy attention that was like both erotic towards her and like lusting after her, but at the same time like was destroying her life and just like vilifying her and making her out to be this terrible, crazy person. And she was just like, okay, fine, just leave me alone then. Like, I'm going to make myself reprehensible to you, essentially, was her sentiment. And that just like, I don't know, like that's scary. Like just the thought of like some people grabbing at your hair, just the imagery of that to me is like gross. But then on top of that, just knowing like, oh, in her heart, she had been like so overwhelmed by the amount of attention that she was receiving, and it was not good attention. And so it led her to this like dramatic, which nowadays shaving your head's not very dramatic, but like at the time it was a very dramatic act that was like, okay, I'm done. Like, move on with your lives and go pay attention to somebody else, essentially. And that like just kills me. That's so sad.
Which is actually interesting to think about, like how the media has evolved since then, because what, like the head shaving was how long ago?
2008.
Like,
so
2008,
more than 10 years ago.
That was like just, but not like 20, you know, like it's not that long ago. And like how much the media has shifted since then. Like now someone shaves their head and you're like, okay, like good job. That would not get a news article. And it was like all over the place. Like it was like on news stations, it was on magazines, newspapers, it was everywhere. And I'm like shocked that like something like that got so much attention.
Well, I don't pay close attention to the tabloids really now. I think when I was younger I did, but it also feels like the news itself doesn't really address as many of those things anymore, but like social media is where, and like the comment sections are where like those sort of crazy vilification situations happen now. It's like, it's not so much about like, oh, the tabloids, you know, said all these terrible things about whatever celebrity. It's like, oh, people are like cyber harassing someone posting like Harry Styles, posing in a dress and,
God
like that
forbid.
sort of thing. It's not like the news is vilifying him. It's actual like people on social media.
Right.
Yeah. I think that too, I think that has a lot to do with like the way that we consume news now and like also how varied our news outlets can be, and then also how inundated we are with like celebrities now.
Yeah.
I think that we have more and more like it's like there's so many icons.
And there's like little niches
it's like every like icon of a celebrity sort of applies to a different niche of people, and you're not really aware of the other ones outside of your niche to an extent. But one thing that did surprise me as well was, along with the news, was just seeing like these very big name newscasters that I'm like used to seeing and like associating with the news and like in the 2000s talking about her. Yeah. And I'm like, this isn't like the news,
right?
Like this is just an update on this person's life who happens to be a singer, and so that was like strange to me to see. I'm like, I feel like you're a more serious journalist or reporter than you seem like to me right now. Yeah, while you're talking about Britney Spears,
about shaving head incident, and it's like,
Whoa. But I think as well, like, hearing about stuff with Justin Timberlake, I wasn't super aware of them dating. Like I knew somehow through the cultural ether, I had absorbed the fact that they had dated at one point. And I knew that they had shown up to an event in the all denim outfits at one point. And that's basically all I knew about Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears. But hearing about how how like their breakup happened, and the way that they were both treated within that breakup by news outlets and by paparazzi and stuff, like that was kind of wild to me. And like the fact that there was like a tell-all special where it was just Britney Spears getting asked about her personal life, and some of those questions were about Justin Timberlake, and I'm like, part of me is like, who cares? First of all, like it shouldn't be a big news spot, like we already said, but also like getting to see her in interviews was really interesting to me, because I actually don't know that I've ever watched an interview with Britney Spears, and so I was actually, I'm kind of ashamed to say that I was surprised at how well-spoken she was. Because I think, to an extent that narrative of Britney just being crazy and just being totally out of her mind, and also being this like little girl from a little town in Louisiana, like I assumed that she would not be eloquent. And she actually said a lot of things that felt very feminist.
Progressive.
Very ahead of her time. Super ahead of her time.
Where she would be asked about, well, like, how do you feel about all these moms that hate you because you're giving a bad image to their children because you are too sexy and too provocative and they look up to you? And her response is, well, it's not my job to babysit their children. That's not my role. I am here to make the art that I make and to do my job. And that's not on, like, if I'm the one who's responsible for what your children receive, then you're doing something wrong as a parent. So that was definitely like a surprise to me, which I'm like ashamed to admit, because just the ways that different media outlets have talked about her has, become part of my view of her over time.
Yeah, I think definitely like some of the interviews I'm like, oh, she's like such a sweet like person, and she's so, she put up with so much shit. Like some of the questions that these news people are asking, like, are you a virgin? Here's the question we're all wondering. Tell us about your breasts. Like
what?
Like crazy things that are like, or you have such pretty eyes. Do you have a boyfriend? Like the stupidest stuff. And she just like gracefully sort of takes it.
Yeah.
And she's kind, but she doesn't necessarily feed into the like disgusting nature of the questions as a whole. So I found her very endearing, and I'm sure that's part of the reason that she had so much fame and people loved her so much was because of her personality.
Yeah. She's really, she seems really, really sweet, really down to earth. And, I mean, obviously, I don't know Britney Spears. But actually, Emma, what you were saying about, like, the perception of her makes me think actually about Paris Hilton, who is someone that people generally think she's actually very dumb. But that's, like, actually a persona she puts on. She's actually very smart, very eloquent, very well-read, well-educated. I think she went to Harvard. Like, she went to, like, an Ivy League school, and I think, don't quote me on this, but I think she has a master's degree. Like, she is a smart cookie. And these women of the late 90s, early 2000s, they just learned how to work the system. Like, we were interested in the innocent, dumb girl next door, and they profited off of that. And, like, that's what I feel like Britney, what she did so well that people were engaged with, is she was innocent and sexy at the same time, and people were uncomfortable but also didn't want to look away. And it's like that interesting, like, she profited off of that. And that's what I find interesting about these, like, celebrities, like, from this era specifically. Like, they figured out how to monetize on public perception, which is so intriguing to me.
I mean, that's still a thing, though.
Oh, totally.
You know?
Kim Kardashian.
Exactly.
Brilliant
the Kardashians
businesswoman.
Classic example with that.
Yeah, it's so intriguing. So I'd love to know, like, what are your thoughts on the media's role? Like, we touched on it a little bit. I mean, I was shocked as well in the interviews. Some as young as, like, I think she was 10. And this guy was like, this creepy old guy was like, do you have a boyfriend? And she's like, no, I don't. Like,
she says, boys are gross.
Boys are gross.
And he goes, well, what about me?
And I'm like,
and she was like,
I don't know.
It depends. What is 10-year-old supposed to say?
I mean, a lot of shocking things about how she was treated in the media, and even how she was made to look like the bad guy in her and Justin Timberlake's breakup. P.S. Justin Timberlake, since this documentary came out, has publicly apologized to Britney and how he treated her and all the things. But I'd love to know thoughts on the media, how she was portrayed, and how it potentially influenced her story, because I feel like there was a huge role in that.
I mean, at least how the documentary paints it, because I'm not, like, well researched into the life and history of Britney Spears, but at least from what I could tell from the documentary, it seems like the media, like, drove her crazy. Like, they started out loving her and she loved them back, and there's sort of this great relationship that she had, but, like, as time progressed, they started posting images of her, painting her as this crazy person and mother, and especially in the Timberlake breakup, he's claiming, I think he claimed she cheated on him. And he
implies it through his song.
Sure. Yeah, and so all of these media outlets come out to Britney then, and they're asking her, like, what did you do, really? What did you do? Like, assuming that it was her fault somehow, even though, like, nobody knows either side of the story, really, from, like, a full perspective. And so that just, like, blows my mind, like, the questions people were willing to ask, the privacy people were not protecting. Like, I don't know. I think I would go crazy if I were treated that way. Just like walking through crowds of paparazzi, people getting in fights right in front of you because they're not getting it. Like, that's scary. It's so scary.
And she has kids at that point as well.
Yeah, she's like holding her baby in the middle of a paparazzi crowd.
Trying to get through. And it's interesting too because, like, they have this guy on who either used to be or still is a paparazzi. And it was interesting because he was talking about how you get sucked into it at first. And I was like, oh, okay, so this guy's not a paparazzi anymore. But then he kind of defended himself. And he was like, well, it was like an equal exchange. Yeah. She needed us. We needed her. And then the interviewer at one point asked, like, well, like, did you ever think to, like, leave her alone? He was kind of like, she didn't want us to leave her alone. And she's like, what about when she said, leave me alone? He's like, she meant for the day. Yeah. I was like, that is the dumbest answer I've ever heard.
Yeah. I mean, and with that, like, he talks about how, like, she was very into the paparazzi at first when she first started really blowing up, becoming famous. He's like, oh, she was so nice to us. She would wave and, like, pose and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, sure, you know, she's excited. She's just become famous. She has all of a sudden has all of this attention, and she's young and doesn't have children or really, like, a private life, you know? Like, she is, like, 18? And so that, like, looking at that reaction and saying, well, that must be how she felt all the time. That's totally invalid. Like, it reminds me, it's a similar mentality to consent and sex.
Yes.
So, like, you can consent to having sex with somebody and then change your mind and say, no, never mind, I don't want to have sex. And if you persist in having sex with that person, you are raping them. It's the same thing. Even if Britney, like, enjoyed and liked having her photo taken, enjoyed the attention at first, if she later decided, I actually don't want this, you are violating her.
Yeah.
And you're breaking, like, social contract with this person. And just because even if one day and then the next day she says something different, that is her choice and that is her privacy. And, like, the thought even of just walking out of your car just to go, like, you see footage in the documentary of her and a friend literally just trying to sit down at what looks like a Mexican restaurant, and they are sitting in their booth and there's just people on top of them taking photos, just flashing incessantly. Like, how do you even function? How do you do anything?
Also, that was before DoorDash. That was before you could, like, you had to go get shit for yourself. Like, you couldn't send someone, like that. It was a different time. Like, you still did your own stuff back then.
Yeah, well, and I think of, too, like, I think the documentary does a good job of showing just the many, many, many scenes in which Britney is being just, like, swarmed by paparazzi, and it kind of leads up to this final moment where she takes out an umbrella and, like, smashes this guy's car because they will not leave her alone shortly after her head shaving. The same guy who they interviewed. I feel like they baited him a little bit.
Oh, definitely.
And then, like, cornered him and made him look like kind of an idiot, which I'm like, okay, that's, like, fine.
Sorry, guy.
You deserve it. But she, like, hits their car and she's like, leave me alone.
By the way, this is right after she loses custody of her children.
Right.
So she's already having a shit time.
Her head is shaved. She's, like, trying to see her kids. These paparazzi are, like, harassing her. And after years of abuse and having, you know, terrible pictures of her taken and stories spun about her life and whatever.
And that she's a bad mother. Yeah. Like, crazy stuff.
She, like, hits his car with an umbrella. And I'm like, yes, I would do that too.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way anybody could go through that kind of pressure and not, like, freak out at some point. And, of course, the pictures of crazy Britney attacking someone's car are the ones that circulate. And it's like...
And make millions.
Millions of dollars. So much money. And no one's thinking, like, is this ethical? Like...
Yeah.
They're just continuing to paint her as crazier and crazier.
Yeah. I mean, that's actually, as you're saying that, I think about when I was in college, I studied photography, and we had to talk a lot about the ethics of photography and how we have, like, we want to express our artistic vision in the photographs that we take, but we also have a responsibility to not exploit people with our photographs. So, for example, I did a lot of photography with different vulnerable populations, like within a soup kitchen, or photographing people on the street and things like that. And it was like we talked a lot about finding that balance in, like, sharing stories, sharing things that we think are important to share, and also giving people dignity, while like dealing with because I can say that I've felt the desire to exploit for the like sensationalism of an image, because that will get more attention than an image that might be more actually respectful towards those people. So I think about that, and like I can see a bit of that. I can see why there's that desire there, but like that's something that I feel like paparazzi don't go through that kind of training, if you will.
No, not at all.
They don't go through, even like with journalism, like you have to know about the ethical and proper way to talk about current events.
Yep.
And paparazzi are just hired and sent out to just go take photos of celebrities and follow them around, and with no second thought of is this exploitative or not.
And in some ways, to do that job, like you have to rationalize. You know, like I feel like there's no way that you can live your life as a paparazzi photographer and not have some sort of like strange rationalization in your brain for why it's a good thing. Because I mean, like you can't live with yourself.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and I mean, and they even in the documentary they also interview a man who was the head over photography for Us Weekly, I believe,
for a long time,
10 years. And he says a line that was something along the lines of, "Oh, we weren't trying to like put these celebrities that we photographed in a bad light. We were just allowing our customers to share in enjoying these celebrities, and like getting to see this aspirational life that they want to know more about." And it's like, okay, so this aspirational life that you're wanting, your customers are wanting to see, is watching a woman who's having a really terrible breakdown because her children have been taken away from her and she's shaved her head and she's being constantly followed by paparazzi, hitting a paparazzi's truck with an umbrella. That's the aspirational life that you're wanting to share in? No, like that's a load of crap.
Yeah.
Like you're wanting to give people something that's sensational and that's exciting and scandalous.
Yeah.
Because that's what's going to sell your magazine.
Yeah.
Literally.
And it's not, there's no thought to like the well-being of the person who you're like microscoping.
Yeah.
Or even her poor children. Like there was this scandal of Britney holding her baby in her arms as she drove. And everyone was like freaking out.
She's a terrible
She's
mother.
a terrible mom. She's an unfit mother, like all these things. And when she was asked about it in an interview, she was like, I mean, yeah, people were swarming my car and I had my son. My son was crying. People were banging on my windows. I just wanted to get out of there. And it's like any rational person absolutely would want to get out of that situation.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of crazy to me that we put celebrities in these high pressure, intense situations, and then we scrutinize them when it's like, oh, you didn't handle that the way I would have handled that. And it's like, you will never have to actually handle anything like that.
Well, we don't even consider like how I would have handled it because we don't even care about the context of the story. We're just like, oh, I just saw an image and that's a terrible thing for a mother to do. Therefore, she's awful.
Yeah.
I just think of the fanfare that requires putting a baby in a baby seat in the back of a car. Like, imagine doing that with like paparazzi literally in your face. Like we
pressed
watched
up against you.
Like they're
and your
touching
car.
you. Like you've got your kid. Like in my mind, she did the safest thing for her kid. And that's not the story that gets told.
No.
Well, the thing is too is, I mean, with photography, there's so much that can be left out. And so like in the image that you see, you don't see all the paparazzi that are there. You just see a photo of the front seat with Britney Spears driving and her baby in her arms. You don't see all the paparazzi that were crowding her as she did this, because they're zooming in. They're not showing you the whole image. And she started driving away, so they can't be on top of her anymore. But like, you don't, like, the common people who are looking at these magazine covers and going, oh no, Britney's horrible.
Yeah.
They aren't seeing it, and they're not there.
Yeah.
And another thing that the documentary mentions too is like her dad used to drive her in his lap. Like,
they lived in the middle of nowhere in Louisiana. Of course he did.
Yeah.
Freaking like 10-year-olds drive semis down there, you know?
Yeah, I mean, my husband was driving a combine by the time he was 14.
I don't even know what a combine is.
Oh, it's a very expensive, very large piece of machinery.
That's the thing. She's coming from that culture and then also is in this crisis situation.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing too. Like, as I'm not a mom, I have a mom, but like, if you too. Oh, good.
Yeah, we all have moms, actually.
Yep.
Yeah, you had to double check.
Nailed it. We are winning. But like I know my mother, if she was in that kind of a situation, she would do whatever it took to get out of that kind of situation, and you know, whatever feels safe. Like, if it feels safer to hold me, like, or to hold a child in your arms and like drive away, like, that's what any mother would do. Like, it's not like, oh, safety first, let me fight through this crowd of people so I can strap my baby into her car seat, take an extra 5 to 10 minutes, and then drive away. Like, that's just not, that doesn't make sense. And the idea that people are like, oh, you're an unfit mother. I'm like, well, other mothers don't have to deal with that kind of a thing. So it's very interesting to think about.
One thing that I also thought was like super interesting about this documentary was kind of the Britney as this sexual icon, which is something that I've always understood her to be growing up, is that she's this bad, you know, sexual lady. But when you watch the documentary, you realize she also had this like sweet, innocent, like girl next door personality. And there's this tension that everybody in society was having a hard time holding, which is like, she can be like an innocent, kind, good person and also project a sexual image and have a sexuality at all.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that was fascinating to me in like how the media handled that, in the way that she was asked questions, and like probably the Christian community like just completely cut her out and things like that. It was just, she had a sexuality, but in her mind, I felt like she didn't think that changed her, like, I don't know, being a good person, or, you know.
Yeah, her wanting to be sexy doesn't make her a bad person.
Yeah,
those things are not mutually exclusive. And one thing that I think about that she said in an interview, the interviewee says something like, asking her about these, quote, Lolita shots that have been taken of her, which, if you're not familiar with the term Lolita, that's like sort of like the innocent but also sexual image of a woman. So it's sort of like the schoolgirl type motif, or wearing like a baby doll dress, but also the baby doll dress is like cutting off right below your vagina, and like that kind of thing. So it's the sexy but innocent. And she had a photo shoot where she was with like baby dolls and stuff, but also sexy. And she was like, well, who doesn't want to feel sexy? Like, it's nice to feel sexy sometimes, and to just have that. And I don't know why anyone would want to, you know, not feel sexy, basically, was her response. She's like, that is a natural part of who we are. We want to be sexy sometimes, and that's totally okay. And I feel like the way she talked about that was very frank with that interviewer. She was just like, this is normal. Like, why are you asking me about it?
And that's where I also felt like she was very ahead of her time. Like, that feels very 2020.
For sure.
Like, that kind of approach to things. And, like, I love that she kind of broke down that barrier of, like, you know, I'm young, but I also have a sexuality. And, like, I'm actually not hiding that behind a good girl persona.
Yeah. And she didn't, like, seem to have a problem with them existing together. Like, it was almost like the media was like, why are you pretending to be one thing when you're actually this other thing? And she's like,
I'm both.
I am both of these things.
Yeah. She's like, I'm a kind, innocent virgin, and I'm also like a sexy, powerful singer. Like, I could be both those things, but it feels like we just really have a hard time reconciling that, like, in our minds. I mean, I think now, like you said, it's becoming more prevalent to, like, unleash the female sexuality and, you know, allow women to be sexy and smart and good and attractive all at the same time, and not, like, this middle, or the, like, prude or sexual being seems to be, like, the two categories that you can fall within, and I think those are merging, but... it's wild to me that she just was like, what do you mean?
Yeah. I love that, honestly. And that really, I think Britney is the perfect example of this. It's like, as society, we have very different expectations when it comes to, like, being a little perfect virgin versus being, like, sexy. And we were also talking after the documentary about the difference between how Britney was treated versus Justin and their breakup. Like, for her, it was like, well, you're still a virgin, right? And then for him, it was like, well, at least you got in her pants, right? And it's like, what brings value, quote unquote, to society is the opposite for the other. Like, for the woman, you better stay untouched. But for the man, it's like, well, at least you got some, right?
Yeah, that double... standard was definitely really prevalent, and you see so much of just like the sexuality of these people in general being this huge object of discussion amongst
somehow
people.
It's everyone's business.
Yes, it's like, have you had sex? Have you not had sex? Do you seem sexy? Do you seem innocent? Do you I even think of, for example, the Jonas Brothers had their purity rings back in the day that they wore.
Oh, yeah.
And when they stopped wearing their purity rings, it was like, wait, what? Like,
well, even when they were
happened?
wearing their purity rings, like, they were getting so much crap. Like, some people were like, oh, that's amazing.
Them.
But other people were like, oh my gosh, they're like these, you know, I don't even know, like, sissy boys.
And that's actually something that the documentary talks about with Justin Timberlake as well, is that he's painted as, like, sissy because he's in a boy band. And there's a tabloid headline that they show that basically says something along the lines of Justin Timberlake, like, maybe a sissy for being in a boy band, but at least he got in her pants. So,
into Britney Spears pants.
Yes. Like, and it's like, okay, so this is full-blown toxic masculinity of harming everyone on all sides, as it always does, and saying that Britney Spears needs to be innocent and sweet, but also sexy, but also don't have sex, because then you're a slut or a whore. But also, when you're dating Justin, you need to have sex with him, because otherwise you're depriving him. And also, he needs to have sex because he's a sissy, because he sings high notes in a boy band, and therefore he's not masculine enough. And therefore, he needs to have sex with you, but you can't have sex. It's this, like, terrible double standard and just, like, back and forth where society is contradicting itself in the things that it wants. Because, I mean, it's this consistent narrative of woman has sex, she is trash. She is a whore. She is a slut. Man has sex, he's a king. He's a god. He has accomplished something.
Which also I don't understand. Like, why is sex equated to being more masculine? You know what I mean? Like, it's just weird concept.
And why can't it be more feminine?
Yeah, why can't it be more feminine?
Like, why is virginity, like, the epitome of feminism, like, being feminine?
Right.
Like, why is that? I don't know. So that's a question I don't even know the answer to. I just throw it out there.
No, it's a good question.
And then it's sad, too, to, like, she's this young girl, and because she's young, people are like, oh, she's too sexy, it's too much, or whatever. And then, I mean, this just circles back to conversations we've had before, is, like, young women, I mean, you get your period at, like, 10, 11, 12 years old, people. Public service
I was 10.
Announcement. Like, that's when you start having a sex drive. Like, you have a sexuality that young. You do.
Well, and even I mean, children like masturbate and children touch themselves and are sexual even then, like before they've gone through puberty. So, I mean, it's ingrained.
Yeah.
We have sex.
Your hormones are still coursing through your veins.
People have hormones. People have genitals.
Yeah.
People have sex drives.
Yes. And that doesn't mean we don't, like, you know, teach our children in the way of, you know, like timing and, you know, waiting for the right moment and the right person, etc. But, like, just like any time someone young acts sexual in any way, it's like our eyeballs are melting out of our heads.
And we act so surprised. Like, we as society are shocked. And it was like, it's interesting too, because like thinking back at that time when she, you know, everyone was asking about her, like, you're still a virgin, right? Like, it's like that was the time that everyone was so overly concerned about things like that. But at the same time, her sexuality is what made her success. Part of it was also her talent and her hard work and all these things. But like, her sexuality is part of what made her successful. And people were mesmerized with it. And it's so intriguing to me that you have those two opposites in the same space. So with all that in mind, we're moving into the real nitty-gritty of what's happening now.
We are in the present day.
We are in the present day.
We've been caught up.
We have been caught up.
In case you knew nothing about Britney Spears before now, that was your briefing.
That's the full briefing. We are prepared to talk about this now. What do you think has helped influence her to consent to having a conservatorship?
Well, I think consent is a loose word here, honestly.
Absolutely.
Because basically what the documentary outlines that happened is... Oh, and also we can link the documentary for you guys to watch if you want to watch it and see everything we're talking about.
It's on Hulu.
Yeah, it's on Hulu, and we can link it in our description or whatever. But it talks about how right after she shaved her head, had this altercation where she hit the paparazzi's car with an umbrella, which she didn't even damage his car.
By the
very
way,
much.
it was like a scratch.
Yeah, it was a scratch.
He was
I mean,
and
like,
a
how
small
much
dent.
damage can you really do with an umbrella?
Nothing.
You really with a big truck.
Like, it's made of plastic. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways,
he was fine.
yeah,
He was fine.
but this had all happened, and then you find out that Britney had also checked into a rehab facility. It wasn't really ever specific on if it was just rehab for her mental health or for drugs or for drinking.
I think it's all speculation still.
Yeah, it seems like it's a bit foggy and hasn't really been definitively put out exactly what she was there for. But there were speculations of her drinking and partying a lot with the likes of Paris Hilton and Lindsay Lohan, and there was also the speculation of her actual just mental health instability. This all happens, and then her father swoops in. Her father, who, based off of what they talk about in the documentary, was not involved in her life very much. He was somewhat involved when she was on the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, or was it Mickey Mouse?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was it.
Yeah.
Mickey Mouse Clubhouse.
Okay. Mickey Mouse Clubhouse is a cartoon, though, isn't it?
I think...
Mickey Mouse House, the Mickey Mouse Show.
Anyway,
Mickey Mouse and Friends.
She was a part of a show.
Y'all can Google it,
when
just
she was
like we will
8.
at the end
When
of
she
this.
was doing her child acting, singing stuff on the show that had the word Mickey Mouse in it. Her father was slightly involved, but not very much. And then he got divorced with her mother. And it seems as though her father was fairly absent until he swooped in for this conservatorship and basically petitioned with court that she was not mentally stable enough to continue to be responsible for her own finances and her own personal life decisions, career decisions, medical decisions, etc. At this point, she's had the custody of her children taken away by her ex-husband, Kevin Federline?
Sounds about right.
Something along those lines.
Asshole.
I mean, I don't know very much about
One
him.
more time?
I don't know.
But all this has happened. to me, it seems as though Britney felt as though she didn't really have another choice because she's undergoing trauma regularly through paparazzi harassment and through all of the media headlines about herself and the photos about herself she's having to see and read, and through her ex-husband not allowing her access to her children. So it seems to me like she saw this conservatorship as a way for her to regain access to her kids and to maybe regain some protection to an extent, maybe some respect because she wasn't getting that on her own. So to me, it seems like all these different pressures were what led her to eventually consenting to the conservatorship. But it also seems like from the beginning, she was reluctant to have her father be over the conservatorship.
Yes.
And that's one thing that's like a big red flag to me, is that she didn't want him to be part of it, and he wasn't part of her life before that. And so it seems like she was under so much pressure, there weren't really other choices.
Yes. Yeah. I agree with your stance on, I wouldn't call it consent, because consent without all the facts is not consent.
Well, and consent when you have no other choice is not consent.
Exactly. I agree. And I think as someone who... Yes. As someone who is not very close to her father as an adult, that would feel very strange to me. Which, by the way, her father has been... In the documentary, it talks about how he was... Well, it briefly mentions how he was also in and out of rehab as she had become more famous. And... one of the managers she worked with in New York said the only thing that she ever heard Britney's father say is that one day she's going to buy him a boat.
She's going to make a lot of money and buy me a boat.
She's going to buy me a boat. I'm like, that is very interesting. And now she's probably buying him all kinds of things because she's not in control of her own finances. So... it is interesting to see this dynamic play out in that she has stated that she doesn't feel safe with her father and that she actually she doesn't, it's been like a long process. But also what was really intriguing is that only a handful of months after this conservatorship, is that it?
Yeah.
Took place. Thank you. I've practiced, believe it or not.
You didn't practice believe, though.
Didn't practice that one. But only a few months after this takes place, her career starts taking off again. She's going on tours. She's coming out with an album. She's on America's Got Talent. Like, she's doing all these things that, like, is crazy.
It's a residency in LA. Like,
a residency in LA.
These are demanding. Like
she's working
probably
Vegas. 15.
Oh, yeah, Las Vegas.
Oh,
sorry.
Yes. Probably like working 15, 16-hour days. Like it takes a lot to put together any kind of show. Like, not to mention a show of that capacity and of that level.
Yeah.
And it's just
It's like
odd.
If she's unfit to like manage herself and her, like, how is she handling this huge of a job? Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah.
And like, who's profiting off of her work?
Yeah. And I mean, one other thing that I would want to note too is that there were even accounts of her father abusing her kids. And so like on top of that, like they mention it really briefly in the documentary that like that she said that he was even harmful to her kids. And I believe that her ex-husband like even spoke out about that. But one way that I've heard the Britney Spears conservatorship framed is actually as a success story of conservatorships, because it is showing that someone who is unstable and who couldn't handle themselves once they had somebody else helping them and doing everything for them, they were huge success. And that's really hard because it's, on the one hand, you do see a direct like timeline correlation between her, she has breakdown, she has the conservatorship established, she's becomes wildly successful once again. You see that timeline and it looks like this is cause and effect here. But is it really cause and effect if she, or like, is it really helping her if she would have been able to do the same thing if she had just had like resources? Like if she had just been able to get the therapy or the account management that she needed, but that didn't take complete autonomy away from her, would she have been just as successful?
Like you can have financial advisors and accountants like managing your estate. You can have lawyers like looking over certain things, and like you can have therapy. And I'm like, this woman has to have post-traumatic stress.
Oh,
like,
literally.
Seriously, some of that paparazzi stuff, I would be afraid for my life in times. And I'm sure that she has been. And that's scary stuff. Like, you probably wake up, in cold sweats with that kind of thing. And, like, of course she needs support. She's, like, doing a huge job. And on top of that, receiving, like, insane amounts of attention that are not kind. And, like, I mean, I just think, I'm like, who wouldn't think they were crazy? Well, you know what I mean? Like, with the way that she's portrayed in the media, with, her doing one thing here and then the media spinning a completely false and opposite story. Like, who wouldn't think that you were crazy? Who wouldn't think that your version of reality somehow didn't match up with the rest of the world?
Absolutely.
Like, that to me, it feels like, okay, it's not working. Again, you mentioned, I feel like I have no other choice. Sure, I will consent to this type of thing. But it's like, why wasn't there anyone out there telling her, no, you're not crazy, you're okay, like, let's find tools to support you and help you, instead of like this weird, like, we're going to take control away from you since you obviously can't manage yourself. And that to me is very concerning.
It is concerning. Well, and back then no one was talking about mental health. That wasn't part of the conversation. It was either you are a well-adjusted adult or you are incapable. There wasn't much in between. And I would like to say, like, Britney was successful after the conservatorship because of the work she put in beforehand, not because of in my opinion. Like, she had the fame and had worked hard for her status and her career years before that took place. And, like, I think Britney could have sneezed and it would have been, like, people would have, like, freaked out. You know what I mean? Like, she had a dedicated fan base that she had cultivated and worked hard for and built relationship with. And just because she had someone maybe pushing her, I don't think is why it was successful. I think it was because of who she was.
Well, and anybody with a good coach and a good mentor and, like, people around you supporting you and managing the things that you don't have time to manage, like, of course that's going to help you be successful. But, like, it doesn't require someone to be able to make mental health decisions for you or health decisions for you or finance decisions for you, like, that's where the line is crossed. And I think even in the later in the documentary, it mentions, like, this is not so much a conservatorship as it is a hybrid business model.
That's what her father's lawyers say in an official document to a court.
Which is like, then it doesn't need to be a conservatorship if it's a business model. Like, this is not, like, that's not the point of a conservatorship. Like, if you're looking at this as a business model, that is a huge red flag.
For sure. And another thing that I actually think about with it is, I can't stop thinking about her seeming like she's essentially like a puppet in this. I think about how in the documentary there's an interview with her when she's much younger where she's asked if she's going to do this for the rest of her life. And she says, oh, well, I would like to eventually settle down and have kids and have sort of like a normal life, and maybe I'll just perform on the side as like a fun thing to do. For fun, because it was just fun.
It was a hobby for her.
And and it was just something that she loved to do. And so then to see her now the fact that she works so much with having a Las Vegas residency, being a host on a competition singing show, having new albums come out, concerts, tours. It's like, is this really what she wants? And obviously what she wanted could have changed since she was 20-something doing that interview. But it seems like she may not have a ton of say.
Well, yeah.
And she's going to do whatever's going to make her conservators the most money.
Well, and she also seems very devoted to her children. And all those things would take her away from her children. And that's what really doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. And she, like, the family thing was torn out of her hands. I mean, and that doesn't mean that Britney is, like, 100% innocent and has never done anything wrong, or, like, but you just have to consider the context of, like this, anybody would be crazy. Like, honestly, I watched the film and I was like, this is someone's version of hell. Like, this is, like, hellish.
Literally.
Like, I can't even imagine just going out to Starbucks and being, like, swarmed like that. That's scary. That's, like...
I would never want to leave my
right.
house.
Like, it's terrifying. And then on top of that, knowing that, okay, yeah, they're going to, like, come hit me with some terrible tabloid article about me, about how awful I am. Like, that's hell.
Yeah.
And so, like, the idea that someone can, like, live through that and somehow be a fit mother and somehow, like, hold on to her marriage, I'm like, it destroyed her life. Yeah. And so now she's, like, coming back, but the things that she wanted and, like, truly desired were, like, ripped out of her hands. And obviously now, like, she's gotten back with her kids and in relationship and things, but it's just, like, to me it's just, like, horrific and sad. And I mean, the conservatorship is, like, a whole nother level on top of that, but I mean,
just the toll of fame and celebrity, especially as a woman, is insane.
Yes, because you can't do anything right as a woman. So, as we've seen with poor Britney,
you do everything right until you don't, and then we tear you back down.
Yeah,
and
you're
put in your place.
Slashed. Yeah. One thing that I thought was fascinating was hearing about this Free Britney movement as it rose up. They talk in the documentary about this podcast called Britney's Gram. And it's these two girls just talking about posts that Britney Spears does on Instagram. And as they're reading them, they're realizing more and more that there's a lot of weird captions that she uses on her posts. And they start to connect dots and realize... it's so fascinating because it's like a conspiracy theory. It definitely is a conspiracy theory, but it's started to gain a lot of legs, and even with hints of Britney hinting that she is aware of this, and also with celebrities jumping on. Just recently, Miley Cyrus, while on stage in a performance, said "Free Britney," like things like that, where it's gained all this traction. But they realized that there is something happening where they feel like Britney is actually being held here against her will, which we've already talked about, how this conservatorship doesn't really seem like it is consensual.
And she's since come out and said, I do not want this anymore. Yeah. She's in legal battles trying to get out of it. So, like, that is clear now. At the time, it wasn't necessarily.
Exactly. And so it's so fascinating to see all these people come with signs and Free Britney masks, protesting outside of the courthouse as they're doing hearings about her conservatorship and whether it will continue. You see social media posts and all sorts of people making videos for Britney, like, Britney, you don't deserve this, and Free Britney, and we're here for you, Britney. It's like this whole movement. Yeah. And it's people coming together over something that, in a way, feels like a small issue in the grand scheme of the world.
Yes.
When I think about other things that people protest about, like and the environment, or Black Lives Matter, or the
World
Women's
Hunger.
March, like those types of things, I'm like, okay, like these are really big issues. Or people protest wars.
Yeah.
You know, like these are really big things. And so this is almost like fun to watch them do this. And I understand, like, this is a person's life we're talking about, and that is serious and that is big. Like, I am not saying that it's fun for a person to be living a life that doesn't involve their consent, or to be living a life that's not the way that they would desire to, against their will. But it's like these people are coming together over their love for this pop star who means so much to them. And it's colorful, and it's
lots of pink.
Yeah, lots of pink.
So much pink.
Very much pink.
So cute.
But yeah, it's fascinating to me to see this. Maybe it's that it's a breath of fresh air.
Maybe
to see a conspiracy theory that doesn't make me want to, like, curl into a ball and die.
Well, it's fun. Yeah, it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, if somebody was like, Kelly, we got to go protest this, I would have been like, you're crazy. No thanks. It's like, that's never something I would participate in. But at the same time, it's like, aw, like, these people are, like, so passionate. And, like, if I was Britney, I would want there to be people out there protesting on my behalf. And so I think that's, I mean, in some way, it's, like, really, like, endearing and sweet.
Yeah, it is.
So what do you guys think?
Is it
Free
Britney? Should we go? Let's go free her.
Yeah.
We can start a protest right now.
Right here, right now. The Woman Being Podcast Free Britney protest.
Yes.
Free Britney, sponsored by Woman Being Podcast.
Yes.
Oh, man. Sweet Britney. Our hearts go out to you, for real.
Yes.
You probably won't ever hear this, but, you know, we support you. But, I mean, I think free Britney. Like, hey, listen, if she's fully of sound mind, which I think she's proven over time she is, and she wants out of this, get out. And I feel like the court should listen to that. But
yeah, it is interesting though, because one of the lawyers that they interview in the doc says that they have never seen somebody get out of a conservatorship in their practice.
Yep.
And that isn't part of what makes it feel almost insurmountable. Like, this is such a mountain for her to climb. At the moment, she's just been asking to get her father off of it because he's had these abusive tendencies, and he's scary to her, and he's not somebody that she trusts, it seems, and not somebody who should be in charge of her life. She wants it to be over to have a bank do it instead.
Over her finances.
Yes.
And then I think
her mom is now
over
her personal.
her personal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for now, they've ruled that it is both this bank and her father as co-conservators over her conservatorship. And it's like, it's a step, but I think eventually we would like to see her released.
Yes.
We want to hear from her someday what really happened.
Dear Miss Britney Spears.
Which may not be our business, but we'll see.
No.
Yeah, that's actually something.
That'd be an incredible woman being interviewed.
Britney Spears, come on our podcast.
That's actually something else I thought of, is like, is this better than the paparazzi? Because it's still sort of putting her personal life right in the middle of media and in the middle of the news. And I know that there's a lot of well intent from the Free Britney movement, but part of me wonders, like, if they're completely off base, if there's just if Britney just doesn't really even want people in her personal life like this, then...
Yeah, that is a whole another thing. Because when you think about it, paparazzi has kind of evolved into what is social media now with trolls.
Yeah.
So.
It has. And, I mean, I think that she's expressed to an extent that she does appreciate the support that she's received from fans. She said she appreciates the support she's received from informed fans. And so Free Britney advocates have presumed that means them and their push to free her. But it's also like, who's to say
who knows
what she really means by that, you know?
For sure.
Just food for thought.
Either way, at the end of the day, we're looking at someone who, because of her gender and her sexuality, was torn down by media, by society, by people who are supposed to be kind. And we look at like the fruit of that and how that's affected her life. And I'm sure it's drastic and traumatic and awful. And it just makes me think twice when I criticize celebrities or, you know, or even like hold someone to like a certain level in my mind and then feel disappointed when they don't measure up as like, these are like actual people who have lives and dreams and family members and like goals. And just because they've achieved some level of fame, it doesn't mean that they've entered into the promised land.
No. All right, woman beings, you heard it here. Britney Spears, woman being, it's a thing. One day.
One day she will be free.
One day she will be free. But you know what I would love is you to tell us your thoughts on Instagram. You can follow us, comment, like, and you can also find us on YouTube. So you can also drop us your thoughts there in the comment section. Give us a like, give us a follow, give us a review. Everything helps. So please make sure you are checking out our stuff.
And what are those handles they can find, Kellyanne?
At Woman Being Podcast on Instagram.
And
womanbeingcommunity.com.
There you go.
So, ladies, thank you for being here with me today. Thank you for sharing your Britney thoughts.
Thank you for having us.
And you know what, woman beings? We'll see you next week with something equally interesting and exciting.
Until then.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, bye, bye,
Oh,
bye.
baby, baby.